So I was in Arkansas, I guess 2 weeks ago, doing a seminar like this, great congregation, the North Heights congregation in Batesville, and I learned there, and I was telling people this weekend that they had tarantulas in Arkansas, and so a lady had caught one, I think in her living room, and I said, what are you going to do with it? And she said, I don't know. And so I said, can I have it? And she brought it to me in a little plastic insect cage, and so she brought me a tarantula, and it was, something that was local to the area. I got a Petoskey stone today, which is local to you guys' area. Now, I'm much more comfortable holding the Petoskey stone than I would have been with the tarantula. I didn't touch the tarantula very much, and I appreciate it. And I heard you guys have something called a glowstone, and that sounded fascinating to me. Get to learn all kinds of neat stuff as I travel the country and talk about God and His awesome nature and character. Get to see all kinds of wonderful people, and you as a congregation this weekend have almost just blown me away with your kindness, the attention you have paid to the lessons, the work that you have done to make this weekend possible, the advertising that you have done, the resources that you have poured into it. And I just want to thank you for that. I can tell that you really care about what you're doing here, and I think it shows in everything that you do, especially as I've gotten to see it this weekend, and it has been encouraging and uplifting to me. So thank you very much for that. In about 1880, there was a man by the name of George Walser. And George Walser had an idea. And his idea was that if you would just get people together who don't believe in God and who don't waste their time on religion, then it would be the greatest society that you could form. And so he looked around basically and said, we don't have one of those, and so I'm going to start one. And he started the township of Liberal, Missouri. The pictures that you're going to see are from Liberal in about 2006 or 2007. And in Liberal, Missouri, the rules for being a founding member of Liberal, Missouri was you couldn't believe in God, you couldn't believe in the devil, you could not believe in heaven, you could not believe in hell, you could not believe in anything that was supernatural. You had to focus all your efforts on the here and now. And so he started Liberal, Missouri, and he said, this is going to be an experiment in infidelity where we show the world that non-theist, people who don't believe in God, are the best people to think through how to make a society. And so as you go to Liberal now, you'll see Walser Avenue, which is named for George Walser. You'll see Darwin Drive, which of course was a tribute to Charles Darwin. You'll see Ingersoll Lane, Robert Ingersoll, a very famous agnostic. What happened with this experiment in infidelity? Well, there's a man by the name of Clark Braden. And if I understand it, Clark Braden was a member of the Lord's Church. He was a traveling preacher, and at this time in 1885, I think he rode a horse all over the place and would preach gospel meetings, and then he would debate people who would not be Christians and would not believe in God, etc. And he was kind of a fiery type guy that was always looking to try to teach the truth or to try to do something that would promote truth and God's Word. And so he decided that he was going to go to Liberal and see how things work. If this is an infidel experiment and it should be working, then I'm just going to go to Liberal and see if everything is as peachy and rosy and happy-go-lucky as George Walser wanted it to be and told us it would be. What do you think he found? You think he found a society where people were respecting people and were putting others' needs in front of their own and were treating people the way they wanted to be treated? Well, not exactly. In fact, not exactly would be a grotesque understatement. When he got there, he then writes an article for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Now, you can't read that because the writing is so small, but right there at the very top it says, "An Infidel Experiment." And this is the actual 1885 article from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. We called their offices, and they looked in their archives and sent us the article, and this is it. And in this article, Clark Braden says, let me tell you what I saw when I went through Liberal, Missouri. He said, number one, the hotels have all become brothels. He said, number two, Alcoholism and drunkenness is rampant in the place. Number 3, he said everybody curses, uses bad, profane language. The women do, the children do, the men do. And he said the property value has sunk so low that the people who were the founding members would love to leave, but they can't leave because they will lose all of their money, and so they're stuck. Now, one of the hotel owners didn't like this particular write-up about his hotel becoming a brothel, and so he sued Clark Braden for $25,000. And in 1885, $25,000 was a considerable amount of money. I mean, that's back in the time when you could, buy a new pair of shoes for 12 cents. You're talking $25,000 was a massive amount, would be probably millions of dollars in our modern currency. And so sues him for $25,000. The case goes before, I think that's the local judge, and the judge throws the case out because the evidence for what Clark Braden said was so overwhelming. Clark Braden never even had to appear before the judge because the evidence was so strong, and the man who brought the case against Braden had to pay all of the court costs. What happens when you put people together who do not believe that there is a God and they put those beliefs into practice? That's what George Walser was trying to show us. It's interesting to me that he realized his mistake. And by realizing his mistake, what I mean is he came in contact with the teachings of Jesus Christ and realized that no, what I had been thinking would be the case was not. When I tried it, it didn't work. He decided that he no longer wanted to be a part of that community of unbelievers at all. In fact, if you go there, it's a fascinating cemetery layout. I've never seen anything like it. Every single one of the graves was laid in a circle. So just imagine, it was about this big. There weren't that many of the founding members, several hundred. At the time, that was a lot, but now it wouldn't be considered a lot. And so it was almost like this auditorium, and all of the graves were laid going circular, and they pointed all into the center of the cemetery where George Walser was supposed to be buried. But there in the center of Liberal, Missouri, where George Walser was supposed to be buried, there's an empty spot. It's still there. You can see the middle spot where he was supposed to be buried, what he was, and he wasn't because he didn't want to be buried in Liberal, Missouri, because he came in contact with the teachings of Jesus Christ and realized that's not right at all. And so he is buried in Lamar, Missouri, about 45 minutes outside of Liberal, Missouri, because he recognized that what he had thought was the case about atheism and unbelief and not believing in God was absolutely not the case. And so what I'd like to ask this morning is simply, if you were to put into practice the teachings of Jesus Christ, or put into practice the implications of atheism, which of those two would produce the kind of communities and societies that we understand and know intuitively we want to be a part of? The first question, let's just ask about Christianity. This is a statement from a man named Bertrand Russell, who wrote an article titled "Why I'm Not a Christian." He was not a Christian, didn't want to be a Christian, didn't want anything to do with Christianity. But here's what he said about Christianity. He said, Christianity, as soon as it conquered the state, put an end to gladiatorial shows. Not because they were cruel, but they were idolatrous. The result was to diminish widespread education and cruelty, by which most of the Roman towns were degraded. Christianity did much to soften the lot of slaves. It established charity on a large scale, something that was missing in the Roman society, where you see somebody that needs something and you try to help them if you have it. It established charity on a large scale, inaugurated hospitals. Now listen to this statement. Although the great majority of Christians failed lamentably in Christian charity, the ideal remained alive, and in every age inspired some notable saints. In a new form, it passed over modern liberalism and remains the inspiration behind much that is most somber in our world, most hopeful in our somber world. Okay, man who says, I don't want to be a Christian, why I'm not a Christian? Ask him the simple question, what happens when people who are acting like Christians go into a society and spread that teaching. You establish charity on a large scale. You soften the lot of those people who are doing poorly. You inaugurate hospitals. And the idea of Christianity remains the inspiration behind much that is most hopeful in our somber world. Now, you just think about that. Would you want to be a member of a congregation or a city where people looked out not only for their own interest but also for the interest of others, where they did nothing through selfish ambition or conceit but in lowliness of mind esteemed others better than themselves, where people loved as brothers and forgave each other, where people did to other people what they wanted done to them? If you were to take the life of Jesus Christ and the teachings of Jesus Christ and put them into practice in your life and in the lives of those around you, what kind of society would you have? It'd be the best you could come up with. Now, is it true that lots of times people who call themselves Christians don't act like Christians? Sadly, that's the case. Lots of times when I'm dealing with atheists and unbelievers, they'll say, yeah, but what about the Crusades? Those people were Christians, and those Christians marched over to the Holy Lands and brutally murdered all kinds of people just to get the land back. What about the Salem witch trials? Now, what you can show is that the Crusades and the Salem witch trials have nothing to do with real Christianity, because if you look at the life of Jesus, let's just take the Crusade. When Pilate said, so you're a king then? And Jesus said, yeah, I'm a king, but my kingship is not of this world, because if it was, my people would fight. But the implication there was, and since it's not, my people don't fight. The idea that in the Crusades it was God's will and the will of Jesus Christ to go over and brutally murder lots of people to get back a piece of property? Absolutely not what Jesus ever taught. The Salem witch trials, absolutely not what Jesus ever taught. If you take the teachings of Jesus Christ and you put them into practice, it's the greatest possible place you can ever live. And I think you know that. I think that's what you're trying to do here at this congregation. You're trying to be a group of people that encourages one another to follow the teachings of Jesus and the inspired writers, so that you will have a community of support that is the greatest possible community of support that can be found on planet Earth. And I think that's true. And I think that's what the church does when the church and the individual members do what God teaches them to do through the life of Jesus Christ. Now, what would happen if you put atheism and its implications into practice? The first thing that you're going to run up against is that atheism has a real problem dealing with morality. And what I mean by that is, if there is no God and no soul, no spirit of any kind, and you and I are a product of random naturalistic processes that have culminated over billions of years, and you're just another animal along the chain, and you're just a basically bag of chemicals, then at what point would you ever be able to say, okay, well, dogs don't have morality and primates don't have morality? Where could you pinpoint that humans should, if there's no dividing line between you and the rest of the uncreated, caused, deterministic world? That's their problem. And they know that. I'm not telling you anything that they don't agree to. They understand that. But as they write about this, they often then don't want you to see what the implications of that would be. Okay, if you were just an animal, if you just happened to be a bag of sugar molecules, then what's the implication of that? What would that mean for how you treat other people? And they don't want you to think through that and see that. But sometimes in their more candid moments, they'll talk about it. Like William Provine, he was a very prominent speaker from Cornell University. He was an evolutionary biologist. And he said, okay, let's be honest here, atheistic evolutionary biologist. If we're right, then here are the things that Charles Darwin understood perfectly. If we're right, then there are no gods, no life after death, no ultimate foundation for ethics, no meaning in life, and no human free will. Now, we have several writings on each of these. In fact, I have a lesson on each one of these, no meaning in life, and that's a very powerful one about the deterministic idea of the universe. What would that mean for trying to produce meaning in the human life? And we've got one on human free will. But here we're just going to focus on number 3, no ultimate foundation for ethics. Well, what's it mean you don't have an ultimate foundation for ethics? Well, if you just evolved like the person evolved next to you, then ultimately whatever you say is no more valuable than what they say. And if they say something that you don't think is ethical, it doesn't matter because your opinion is just as valuable as their opinion. And so, as you look at what Charles Darwin said, he said, a man who has no assured and ever-present belief in the existence of a personal God or of future existence with retribution and reward can have for his rule of life, as far as I can see, only to follow those impulses and instincts which are the strongest or which seem to him to be the best ones. So Charles Darwin's saying if you're just an animal, evolved from other animals, then the only way I know to make decisions is you just follow the impulses and instincts which are the strongest or which seem to you the best ones. Okay, so you go into a local steak joint and you order a 20-ounce T-bone. The guy next to you orders like an 8-ounce sirloin, but you get yours and yours looks like the 8-ounce sirloin and his is huge and it looks like a 24-ouncer and you're starving and you're bigger than he is. And the instinct or impulse which seems the best to you at that moment is that you go over and demand he give you his steak. So you walk over there and say, give me your steak. He says, no, they brought this one to me. You say, yeah, but I want it. He says, well, I don't care if you want it. So you punch him in the face and you take it. Have you done anything wrong according to this idea of, hey, you just follow the impulse and instincts which seem the best to you? No, you haven't. Now, here's what the atheistic community will say. Okay, yes, we're not saying you did anything morally right or wrong, but we don't like getting punched in the face. And so we will make rules for people who punch other people in the face to put them in places where they won't do that to us. But then when you ask, well, hold on just a second, what I want to know is, did this person do something morally wrong? Was it wrong to punch someone in the face? And they basically just have to say, well, we can't say. We just don't want to get punched in the face. And so they will then enact rules and laws and legislation to not want to get punched in the face, but they won't say the person did anything wrong because they can't. Because from this frame of reference, from this worldview, you literally can't say anything is morally right or morally wrong. In fact, listen to Dan Barker. I debated him in 2009. He's the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is, I think, the #1 largest group of unbelievers in the nation as far as who pay dues and who ascribe to a particular group. And here's what he said in a debate with Peter Payne in 2005. There are no actions in and of themselves that are always absolutely right or wrong. It depends on the context. You can't name an action that's always absolutely right or wrong. I can think of an exception in every case. Okay, you see what's going on there? Okay, if atheism is true, then you just weigh actions based on the consequences of those actions. He says there's not a single action that you can think of that is always absolutely morally right or morally wrong. So, in 2005, a student who was there at the debate came up to the microphone and said, can you think of a time when rape would be okay? He said, well, that's kind of far out, but I could if an alien group came down to planet Earth and said, we're going to kill every human being on the planet if you don't do this to a person, then yes, it would be your moral obligation to do that to save all the people on the planet. Okay? I knew that he had said that. And so in our debate, I said, okay, you said this in the 2005 debate with Peter Payne. Do you still believe that? And he said, yes. I said, what about 2 women? Could you do that to 2 women? He said, yes. I said, what about 2,000? He said, yes. I said, what about 2 million? You see where that's going? That ultimately, to save all of humanity, well, you could say, well, you would have to just keep going. What about 20 million? What about 200 million? If it would save all, you see the problem. You see, when you start weighing ethical decisions based on the consequences, and that's all, then it drives you to places that, well, in the debate, there were many Christians, and you could tell they were appalled by what Dan Barker was saying. In fact, naively at the time in 2009, I thought if you could just, in fact, I thought that there's no way this discussion is going to go like I think it's going to go. There's no way he's going to say that you could do that to 2 million people. And if he does, that's game over. That is, hey, the atheists will try to separate themselves from that, and there's no way that they will ever say he... No. It wasn't game over. In fact, basically, the atheistic community was like, yeah, I mean, you don't like to think about it, but yeah, that's a... He looked at me, you could tell that the audience was agitated at this, because most of them were Christians. Probably out of the 550 we had in the audience, 420 of them were Christians. And he looked at the audience, and then he looked at me, and he looked at everybody, and he said, well, you'd thank me because I saved your life. Because he said it would be his moral obligation. I said, no, I wouldn't, because you would have done something morally wrong. He said, well, at least your life would be saved. I said, well, I know that I'm going to somewhere better after this life. And I would never want anybody to do anything morally wrong, because where I'm going is better than that. And he said, you don't know that. And I said, I do know that. You see, because morality comes from the nature of God. And the reason that you behave in a moral way is not because you size up the consequences and hope it's better for you passing on your genetic information, which is what the atheistic process basically says. Hey, you be nice to people because it's better for you and you'll pass on your genes, or you be mean to people because it's better for you and you pass on your genes. No, you behave in moral ways because you were created in the image of God. And when you correspond your actions to God's image, that is moral. And you've got somewhere better to go than this. But if you don't think you've got somewhere better to go than this planet, then what are all your actions going to be designed to do? Keep you alive physically as long as possible. But now I think you and I both know something. You can live to be 85, you can live to be 90, you can live to be 100, you can live to be 125, which is about the ceiling of it right now. But on the day that you are 125, you understand that there's going to be something after this. And the point of this life is not to stay alive as long as possible. The point of this life is to do as much spiritual good as you can to help as many people get to a place where eternity will last. Well, you don't get that from an atheistic society. So let's look at this idea of abortion and atheism. You know, where would you get the idea that in the United States of America and all over the world, but the United States of America specifically for us, that it would be okay to kill 1 million unborn children every year? That's what we've done since 1973. We have brutally murdered 1 million children in utero and slapped a medical label on it of abortion and said it's a surgical procedure. And our nation as a whole has turned a blind eye to what actually is happening here. Where do you get the idea that somehow that would be morally permissible? Let me ask you a question. Where don't you get it? If there is a God and humans are created in God's image, then that means humans are different from all animals on the planet. And I don't say other animals because humans are not another animal. Humans and animals are a different created kind. They're not the same. And the Bible makes that distinction over and over, that God created humans in his own image, and animals are put here for humans to have dominion over, put here for humans to use, put here for humans to eat, put here for humans to have in a way that would be a companion, pet, like dog, etc., but not in any way equal to the moral value of a human. Now, our society is losing this concept, and let me tell you what I mean by that. In thought experiments where they will ask people, especially now here in the United States, okay, suppose that there is a train coming down a track, and there is a dog on this side, and there is an older, sick, 80-year-old hobo on this side. And you have to decide, because the train's coming down the track, you're standing at the switch, the brakes are off of the train, you have to decide which way the train's going to go. Where do you flip the switch? Do you flip it and let the older 80-year-old hobo be hit by the train? Or do you flip it and let the dog be hit by the train? Now, when the question is posed like that, most every single person says, okay, you flip it and you let the dog be hit by the train. And then they change the statement. And they say, okay, right over here, this is your dog now that has lived in your house for the last 10 years. And this is a hobo that you don't know who's done a lot of bad things. And he's 80. Okay, now the train's coming down the switch, and you're deciding whether you're going to let the train hit the hobo or hit your dog. Which one do you flip? You know, I don't remember the exact percentage, but I think it was something over 50 of people who flip it and let the hobo die and keep their dog alive. Why? Well, because we're losing the concept of what being created in the image of God means. It means you are inherently valuable from the point of conception, and it doesn't matter how much you're going to contribute to the human endeavor. And what I mean by that is the point at which a human becomes a human is conception, and you see that all through the Bible. And Mary conceived and bore a son, and Elizabeth conceived. Do you understand that the first person to recognize the lordship of Jesus Christ was the unborn John the Baptizer? And the word that was used for the unborn John the Baptizer was the exact same word that was used for Jesus when he was born in a manger. And so the biblical text recognizes Jesus in the manger as the exact same entity, the same kind of being as John the Baptizer in utero. Now, there's no way from a biblical point of view that you can say that human life is not inherently valuable. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights or inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, where do they come from? They're endowed by your Creator. You get rid of the Creator, what do you get rid of? Those human rights. And so George Bush, when in 2001, terrorists fly planes into the Twin Towers and kill about 2,700 people, gets on international television on every channel that he can broadcast it and say, we're going to have a war on terror, and we are going to stamp this out, and we're not going to let this happen, and we're going to hunt down every cell of Al-Qaeda, and we're going to find every place that this is being done, and we're going to stop it. Because 2,700 United States citizens were killed that day. You didn't see or hear a speech, though, that says, hey, just incidentally, we also murdered 2,700 of our own citizens via abortion today. Oh, and by the way, yesterday we did the same. And the day before that we did the same. And we'll continue to do that. And we're going to let that go on, but we're going to make sure the terrorists are taken care of. Now, I'm not talking about Bush's policy of any type of that. That's not what I'm saying. This is not a political discussion. What I'm saying is, in the United States of America, we have become calloused and numb to the fact that we're killing almost 3,000 babies every single day and acting like we're not doing anything. Now, do you believe our nation is going to have to account for that in the judgment? Absolutely. Do I think and would encourage all of us to pray that that changes? Yes, and we've seen some encouraging signs with the reversal of Roe v. Wade, et cetera, and giving some more power back to the states and things of that nature. But as you look at that, where would you get an idea that it would be all right to do that? I mean, where would you get all right that it would be morally acceptable to kill unborn children? Well, as you look at Charles Darwin, there's no fundamental difference between man and the higher mammals and their mental faculties. As you look at Barbara Burke, here's what she says: among some animal species, infant killing appears to be a natural practice. Could it be natural for humans too? A trait inherited from our primate ancestors? Charles Darwin noted in The Descent of Man that infanticide has been probably the most important of all checks on population growth throughout most of human history. If you're just an animal and animals kill their babies, then you as an animal could, you see what's happening there. Komodo dragons are fascinating creatures. I love a Komodo dragon. Lots of times I use them in illustrations, especially in my dinosaur lessons that I do. The diet of an adult Komodo dragon consists of 10% of baby Komodo dragons. Baby Komodo dragons can climb trees. Adult Komodo dragons cannot. That's why you still have Komodo dragons on the planet. They don't care. They lay eggs. The babies hatch out. The parents, if they see one, they eat them. You're just an animal. Is it you somehow checking the population that you don't have enough physical resources that you can take care of a child, and so infant killing is fine because you could never get that from the Bible. Can you get that from atheism? You can. I think you're seeing what's going on here. Let me tell you about this guy before you read this. Peter Singer is the world's leading atheistic ethicist. Now, ethics is supposed to be the study of how you're supposed to behave, what moral behavior would look like. Richard Dawkins, in a video with Peter Singer, said that he believed Peter Singer was the most moral person he had ever met. And so you're reading statements from the atheist that the atheistic community says this guy knows more about how a person should behave than anybody on the planet. That's what they're saying about this guy. And here's what he says: if we compare a severely defective human infant with the non-human, a dog or a pig, for example, we'll often find the non-human to have superior capacities. Now, stop right there. Let's break down what he's saying. Let's say that you look in utero and you have a test of some sort, and it's going to tell you that this baby that's going to be born is going to have some disabilities, maybe mental, maybe physical. And he says that this child is not going to be able to contribute to society. And it may be that you have a German Shepherd dog over here that's about to have puppies, and this German Shepherd might be a canine dog and might have a bloodline that is so powerful that these puppies are going to be some of the best canine dogs that have ever been born. Now, if you've got the decision between keeping one of these alive, you're looking at the human that's going to have some disabilities in some way, and it's going to be a burden on society. You're looking at the German Shepherd, and the German Shepherd is going to have puppies that are going to help society. Now, he says historically, and he says, but it was never right, but we used to do this. He said historically you would look at this situation and you would say, oh, I'm going to keep the human alive. And when asked why you would keep the human alive, you would say, well, because it's human. Right. Now, from a creation standpoint, because it's created in the image and likeness of God. He says, but notice, only the fact that the defective infant is a member of the species Homo sapiens leads it to be treated differently from the dog or pig. Species membership alone is not morally relevant. It said the only reason you ever keep the human alive is because it's human, but that's just species membership. And he says that's not morally relevant. Okay, if there's no creator, then humans aren't created in God's image, and they're not endowed by their creator with the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so, as you continue, he says, if we can put aside the obsolete and erroneous notion of the sanctity of human life, we may start to look at human life as it really is. Well, what do you mean by that? Nevertheless, the main point is clear. Killing a disabled infant is not morally equivalent to killing a person at all. Very often it's not wrong at all. He said, if we as a society don't grant personhood to infants until we see if they're going to be valuable, then if you kill them before we say they're people, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, here's what I want you to stop and recognize. It's one thing for an apologist like myself, a person who defends Christianity like myself, to stand up and say, atheism leads to this. The implications of atheism are this. Now, lots of times, that's exactly right, and when you present that, okay, that's powerful. But that's not what I'm doing here. Who is saying that it's all right to kill an unborn or disabled infant? Who's saying that? I'm not saying it. Who's saying it? The atheistic ethicist that Richard Dawkins says is the most moral person he's ever met is saying it. Now, it is no coincidence that in Psalm 14, when the Bible says the fool has said in his heart there is no God, the next statement off of the pen of the inspired writer is, they are corrupt, they have done abominable things, there is none who does good, no, not one. Now, what is that? It's commentary on what happens when people reject the idea of a loving and moral creator. If you put these ideas into practice, now let's ask the question, have these ideas been put into practice? Yes. Yes, they have. On a grand scale, to the tune of we have literally murdered an entire generation of our people, to the tune of 60 million kids. There's only 330 million people in the United States of America. You're talking about 1/5 of our population we've killed. You know, we were up in arms and irate, as well we should have been, when the things that happened in Germany happened. And that was about, all told, 9 to 10 million people that were killed. We've eclipsed that by 6 times. Well, as we continue. An infant with severe brain damage, this guy wrote a book titled Created from Animals, The Moral Implications of Darwinism. He's saying you can't get around this stuff. If you're going to think through, if atheism is really true, then this is what is really the case. For years, may never learn to speak. Its mental powers may never rise above a primitive level. In fact, its psychological capacities may be markedly inferior to those of a typical rhesus monkey. In that case, moral individualism would see no reason to prefer its life over the monkey's. Okay, you might have a child that's disabled. He or she might not be able to mentally process things above a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old level. He said in that case, I mean, why would you keep it alive if you wouldn't keep a monkey alive if you had to choose between the two? The rhesus monkey would be more valuable to society in some ways. Here's what he says then. Some unfortunate humans, perhaps because they've suffered brain damage, they're not rational agents. What are we to say about them? The natural conclusion, according to the doctrine we're considering, would be that their status is that of mere animals, and perhaps we should go on to conclude that they may be used as non-human animals or used as laboratory subjects or food. This man taught, if I understand it, on a very respected university in the United States of America right now. About, if I understand, 80% of the college professors on state universities are atheists. And he says, you know what? I mean, if we're just animals, why not just use the people that don't help society like we use other animals, laboratory subjects or food? There again, this is not Kyle Butt saying this. Okay, now let me ask you a question. Do you see why I feel like it's very, very, very important to teach people that there is a God? It's not an intellectual exercise. When you stand up on Wednesday, when I'm going to debate this guy, Michael Shermer, he is smooth and he talks about making the world a better place and things being moral, and we all just need to find meaning in our own lives, and that meaning needs to be nice to other people. And if you listen to what's going on, it sounds like all atheism wants to do is just make this world a better place. But the implications of atheism will never be equipped to make this world a better place. In fact, those implications that they, in their more candid moments, admit will make this world like liberal Missouri, will make this world like Joseph Stalin's Soviet Union, will make this world like just go down the list of people who were not trying to put into practice the teachings of Jesus Christ. This guy, 2006, there was a award, of course, for the Texas Teacher of the Year. This guy, Eric Pianka, got that award. He was a scientist, taught science, and his specialty was studying reptiles and especially lizards, as I understand it. And he stood up in the audience of 400 people and said, we got a real problem on this planet, and that is humans. They're the problem. They're getting in the way of other organisms that have just as much right to live as humans do. In fact, humans are proliferating around the globe to such a degree that it's ruining habitat for other things like lizards and things of that nature. And he said, what we really need to do is stop that growth. But basically stopping the growing population of humans is not going to be enough. We really actually need to kill a bunch of the humans we got. In fact, we need to kill about 90% of them. And what would be good for that? Maybe some type of airborne Ebola virus or something that would kill a whole bunch of them but then dissipate and not still be around. We wouldn't want to use like a nuclear bomb or anything because you'd have the radiation and stuff. And so something that would kill them quick within a few days and not be around any longer. Texas Scientist of the Year says we need to kill 9 out of 10 people. What happens at the end of his speech? You would hope that there were some educators there that said, hold on just a second, do you hear what he just said? The 400 people rose to give him a standing ovation. Afterward, this is what a student commented on Dr. Pianka's speech at the 109th meeting of the Texas Academy of Science. Dr. Pianka's talk at the TAS meeting was mostly of the problems humans are causing as we rapidly proliferate around the globe. He's a radical thinker, that one. I mean, he's basically advocating for the death of all but 10% of the current population. And at the risk of sounding just as radical, I think he's right. Do you mean that the Scientist of the Year in Texas stands up and says we need to kill 9 out of 10 people, and the students who are listening to him say, yep, I believe he's right? What do you think is going to happen next? Are you surprised at the shootings that we see all over our nation? One of the very first one, the Columbine shootings. The guy was wearing a natural selection shirt. And in the writings of what the 2 teenage shooters were doing, one of them said, me and Dylan are going to step up natural selection and step it up a notch and kill those people that are not fit to live. Folks, we're not dealing with academic, intellectual stuff that you can just banter about in books and, okay, we got some propositions over here and you got some propositions over there and we'll just talk about it, and at the end of it we'll all shake hands and everybody will be nice and I'll be... No, you're dealing with a concept that when you get rid of the concept of a God, you get rid of the concept that humans have inherent value. And you get that concept out of society, and society spirals to degradation. I think you understand where we're going. Enter Jesus, who steps into the world and says, hey, this is what humanity should look like. Puts little kids on his lap and says, unless you become as a little child, you'll no way inherit the kingdom of God. Values every single person he ever comes in contact with, and gives us an example of looking at others and seeing that it doesn't matter what they've done, where they are, what they have, how smart they are, how fast they can run, how pretty they are. They're valuable for one reason, that God made them. And folks, wouldn't it be awesome if everybody in here recognized the inherent value of every other person and treated them as if they were as precious as Jesus treated us? That would be the kind of world where you want to live. Sure appreciate you being here this morning.